My name is Jill Coyle, and welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce, where we talk the nitty-gritty aspects of divorce and help each other come through this not only surviving, but thriving. I'm a divorce attorney, and I'm interviewing other experts and people just like you who are going through or have been through a divorce, so you can have the latest and greatest information on all things before, during, and after divorce. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of No One Dies from Divorce. I'm really excited for this episode today because this is going to be something that I think a lot of people going through divorce have questions about and really want to get a lot of information about. And so we are talking today about what a guardian ad litem is versus a special master, how they can benefit your case, how you can utilize them, and when you should not need them. I have one of my good friends on the show today, Sam. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Sam Sorensen is one of my good friends. We've known each other for over 11 years now. We work very, very closely and in line in Salt Lake City, Utah. And Sam has actually taken a lot of his practice, and now he is doing, you would say, 75% garden ad litem work, about 25% special master work.
That's correct. That's pretty much how we split it.
So he's the perfect person to have on this episode to really talk about this, to really get in there to answer all your questions and help you through this process of whether you think that it would be a good fit or if you need to go in the direction of getting one to help with your children. So let me tell you a little bit about Sam. He's an experienced family law practitioner and understands the difficulties clients face when going through divorce, whether it is a challenging custody dispute or the division of complex financial assets. Sam recognizes the needs for compassionate yet aggressive representation. Sam also helps clients with estate planning and business issues. He is the owner of SEB Legal, which is, again, in Salt Lake City, but you do work all over the state of Utah. Is that correct?
That's correct.
He's a member of the family law section of the Utah State Bar, a private guardian ad litem, and special master. He's also recognized as a top family law attorney by many different organizations, including Utah's Legal Elite, by Utah Business Magazine, and as a Mountain State super lawyer. So he's one of the best, and honestly, I consider him one of my closest friends. We've always been there for each other through these years of growing our businesses, growing our firms. And I guess a little small fact, me and Sam worked together at the same law firm for a year. That's how we really got to know each other before I left. And then he went to do his own things. And then I started my own firm in 2014. You went into your own firm 2017, 18?
2016. 2016 is when I opened my doors. Yep.
Okay, 2016, and then he took over SEB Legal, which is now a multifaceted firm in Utah, and they do all different kinds of legal. But for his specific things that he does, again, we're talking about garden ad litem versus special master work. I also wanted to let you know that Sam is an avid diehard U of U fan, and I am an avid BYU fan. And I had to throw this in the podcast because BYU beat the U for the first time in 12 years on Saturday night. This was September 11th, so it's easy to remember whenever this podcast dropped. And I just have to rub it in your face because we won, Sam. And it wasn't just like a luck win. Like sometimes BYU has won in the last seconds, or we've gotten a Hail Mary. But this was just, we played better football. So there. Yes.
Congratulations. My kids have now seen BYU win.
Yes, they have.
Since they're 12 years old, 14, 10, they haven't ever known BYU to win this game. So this is a good experience for them.
I know. And it's been exciting because BYU is got an invitation to the to be in a conference. Pac-12? What is it? The Big 12.
Big 12. You're obviously a very big Cougar fan.
I know. Sorry. I get it messed up on the conferences because there's the Big 12, the Pac-12, And so I want to make sure that we got that right. So anyways, it's a big, exciting week in BYU football. I have to tell you, though, Sam knows this, is that my husband went to the medical school at the University of Utah, and we're just big, avid sports fans. So when the U left and went into their own pack, and it kind of divided the I guess because we weren't playing each other in the conference anymore, that it was easy to start rooting for the U because, you just want your Utah schools to do well. And so it's been really fun in the last several years to watch the, both schools and what they're doing in their sports program. So it's been fun. And Sam went to Gonzaga law school, which he's a big Zags fan too. And for basketball, that's been really competitive as well. So anyways.
Yeah, it's been good to see my teams beat the Y over the years.
I know. I love it. Anyways, back to the show. Let's talk a little bit about, I really want you, in your own words, tell our listeners what a guardian ad litem is. Now, we call these people usually GALs or gals. So for reference of this show, that's probably what we're going to say, because it's, as you can tell, it's very hard for me to say guardian ad litem. I've messed up like twice already. So we're going to call them gals for the rest of so tell our listeners, what exactly is a gal and what do they do?
Thanks. So so I'm a private guardian ad litem. So it's a PGAL is what I usually call it, a gal. There are public ones that are appointed in like juvenile court cases in the state of Utah. But in domestic district court cases here in Utah, it's guardians ad litem. And they're appointed by the court to represent minor children whose parents are going through normally either an especially difficult divorce, high conflict divorce, or there's allegations of abuse or neglect as it relates to the children in a divorce or parentage action or any kind of domestic action. So the guardian ad litem is an attorney that is represented to represent the best interest of the children to the court. And so that's sort of a simplistic way of saying it. There are some nuances to that and some statutory responsibilities that are associated with being a guardian ad litem and what you are appointed to do, but that's generally speaking what a guardian does.
Right. And just so our listeners know, I'm actually a private guardian ad litem as well. I definitely don't take as many cases as Sam does, but I continually have a few cases where I have been appointed as a private guardian ad litem. And the other thing I wanted to just mention, obviously, we are going to talk a little bit more specifically about the state of Utah because that's where Sam and I are licensed and that's where we practice doing this. However, I'm also licensed in Texas. I know that this is what they call their representatives or attorneys that are appointed for the kids is also a guardian ad litem. And I've also heard that it's been called this in several other states. So, if it isn't specifically called a guardian ad litem in your state, it's going to be whoever is an attorney that is appointed to represent the child for purposes of best interest in the court. So some states might call it a little bit different, but I just wanted to get that out there that most states call it a gal or a guardian ad litem. And then the second thing I wanted to mention is that, again, Utah has they have an actual office of the guardian ad litem where they're state employees, they're attorneys, and they are appointed in cases specifically most likely juvenile court where a child has to be represented for purposes of, abuse, neglect, dependency. And so because of that, the state then funds that. A few years ago, how long ago was this? About 10 years now?
It's when we were working together, I think they switched it over.
Yeah, so eight years ago in Utah, they specifically changed it to where they were no longer going to fund appointing guardian ad litems to private divorce actions. And so because of that, we now had to do what's called the private guardian ad litem forum, I guess. And a couple of things that we should mention is Sam and I had to do a training to get it. We have to meet certain criteria to be appointed a private guardian ad litem, and then we have to do CLEs and which is continual legal education, and we also have to. They would like us to take at least one pro bono case a year to be able to maintain the status of the guardian ad litem. The other thing you should know. Oh, sorry, Sam. What were you going to say?
We also have to undergo, DCFS and criminal background checks every 2 years.
Oh, so. Yes. Yeah. So we have to put that in to obviously make sure that we don't have any background regarding DCFS or criminal that would make it, I guess, compromised us from being a guardian ad litem. The other thing is in Utah, specifically because they made it the private guardian ad litem, it is the responsibility of the parents in the divorce that pay for the private guardian ad litem. So there's what would you call it, a statutorily based fee that the courts impose, and usually the parties split the cost, and you then pay for your guardian ad litem to come on your case, and then we're going to get to exactly what a guardian ad litem does. Just so you know, in Utah, at least the way that we do it, if you want a good guardian ad litem like Sam, who has spent a lot of time studying and becoming better at this so that he can be the best person to represent these children in court, you're going to pay a premium because he's worth it. And he's able to do that pursuant to the rules in Utah. So I just kind of wanted to go down that a little bit. Okay, so we kind of know, that's a guardian ad litem. So let's talk, what's a special master? And what are they specifically supposed to be doing?
So a special master doesn't necessarily have to be an attorney, but a special master has essentially been delegated court authority to make decisions on certain subjects. So a lot of times in domestic cases and divorces or any kind of those kind of cases, a lot of times the parties will agree to appoint a special master, and the court will sign an order stating that this individual can decide issues relating to the kids or parent time or disputes. A lot of times it's a good opportunity, or if you have a high conflict case, or if you're finding yourselves in court a lot for the same kinds of reasons, you get somebody like me that can be appointed, and you'll submit those issues to me, and I can rule on them in a couple of days rather than waiting for a court hearing in a month and a half, at least in Utah. Essentially it's a quasi judge, if you want to say it that way. But I only have, as a special master, specific authority that's been granted by the court. And there's a rule of civil procedure that governs the use of special masters, and we just had a recent appellate court case come out on special masters as well here in Utah. But it's kind of being used more and more recently as sort of courts are more backlogged. We're getting more cases that are using special masters to kind of resolve those things that can be resolved.
Yeah. And we talk a lot on my podcast about high conflict personalities, MPD disorders, borderlines. And, when we're talking about high conflict divorces, when you have where you have an opposing party that is consistently litigating, consistently making issues, where you have to create really solid boundaries because they do fit within the MPD personality disorder, or they are just high conflict personality. A special master is the best way to set up that boundary because it stops the communication from A to B and puts somebody in the middle of it. It also takes away their power of continually dragging you back into court, which tends to be a problem with these kind of cases. And so it kind of stops that, and it gives, like you said, kind of quasi ability to make those decisions so that they're not continually going to court. So we'll talk a little bit about that, about special masters at the end of this, but let's kind of get into the GAL. What would you say is when does somebody need a GAL? When would you say a case just absolutely needs a gal?
That's a great question, because each case is going to be a little bit different depending on personalities and how the parents are behaving. In those cases where there has been abuse allegations or neglect in a domestic case, if that is a major issue in the case, then I would say a guardian would be good. In those cases that don't have specific abuse or neglect allegations, I've found that the most help can be to parents to hear what their kids are saying to a neutral third party. Now, I say neutral third party. I'm not necessarily neutral in these cases, but it is a third party that's coming in that doesn't have a dog in the fight, except to represent their kids and make sure that their kids are taken care of. That's from the court perspective. And so if you have kids between, probably on the low end of about 7 or so, up through about 16, and there's a real big dispute about what their wishes are or what they really want in a parent time situation, sometimes a guardian can be helpful there. The other types of cases that I've found that we can really help on is if there is a lot of conflict between the parents in terms of what to do with a difficult child, or a child who's struggling a lot with with parents, or going back and forth between houses. We have a resist-refuse dynamic where we have a kid that doesn't want to go to a parent's house. A guardian can be really good to at least talk to that child, try to find out what's going on with that child's, is this something where there's a justifiable reason for this behavior, or is this something where a parent may be influencing? And in those kind of situations, it's not that the guardian is going to say, oh yes, definitively I know what's going on. It's more likely that they're going to say, we need some either some therapeutic help, or we need the court involvement to make a change somewhere. And in those cases, we can see some progress being made and to sort of break the paradigm of whatever currently is happening and move forward with the case.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's summarize. So a guardian ad litem is really good, obviously needed to investigate allegations of abuse, whether it's emotional neglect or physical abuse. I think that that's really important. The second one we talked about is so let's get into this a little bit more, because you talked about it's really good for children to be able to have a voice, or to have a third party neutral, somebody that they can talk to. And so in Utah, the statute for specifically talking to a children or taking a child's preference into account is 14. And even then, the statute specifically says the court may. It doesn't say it will or it must. And so when you're talking more specifically about it gives a child the ability to talk to somebody about what they want. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that mean to that child that wants to talk about, hey, this is what I need?
Well, so a lot of times you get kids in a divorce situation, especially if it's a brand new divorce and they're in a loyalty bind, right?
Right.
They want to make sure that both, they love both of their parents for whatever reason, and there's lots of different kinds of reasons. They feel like they can't be completely upfront, honest with one or both of their parents in terms of how they're feeling about things, or what kind of a situation they'd want. And so in order to please a parent, they'll say, well, I don't want to be with dad at all, or I don't want to be with mom at all. And then they'll go to the other parent's house and they'll say the exact opposite thing. And so you have both parents who are legitimately coming into court and saying, well, he's told me that he wants to be with me full time. And dad's coming in and saying, well, he's told me he wants to be with me full time. And you have this, the court has no idea who's telling the truth. When in fact, they both are probably telling a part of the truth. Or all of the truth, and you have a kid who doesn't know kind of how to navigate this situation. And so you bring somebody like me or you into the case, and I'm able to sit down with the child in my office and just sort of talk about, how are you feeling about this? What's going on? How do how's it like at each house? I really try not to ask them specifically, unless it's an older child, who do you want to live with? Because that's not really a fair question to a younger kid.
Right.
But you can get the sense of, this kid loves both of his parents. Let's look at this practically speaking and say, this is probably the better parent time situation, or this is probably not as big of a deal as mom is making it, or this is, this particular thing that happened in school really didn't affect the kid as much as maybe he told dad. And we can maybe lessen some of the conflict a little bit about a specific point and try to move these kids towards some normalcy and take them out of the middle of the conflict. Because the kids in any divorce situation, when it gets sort of high conflict and really contentious, they're in the middle of it, whether the parents want them to be or not.
Right.
They're going to be in the middle of it. And having a guardian can, most of the time, or hopefully some of the time, can take those kids out and create a buffer so that, I can go into court and say, or I can tell the parents or their attorneys, and I can say, look, I don't think that's that big of a deal. I think we need to move on to, more pressing issues, or I think that this parent time schedule is going to be better for this particular child, given their, how far away parents are living from each other and what's going on, or Johnny doesn't really mind mom's new boyfriend as much as dad thinks he does.
Right.
It's that kind of stuff where you have somebody that can come in and give that perspective, which I think can be helpful. A lot of times parents disagree with it and they think that I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't really care.
Right. Well, and that's what's interesting with my experience as being a guardian ad litem. I always have one parent mad at me. And it's interesting because that parent can shift throughout the case, because it's all going to depend when when we make recommendations, it always seems like it's going against a parent or what they want. And just like Sam said earlier, like our job is not to be this like neutral party and to be fair to both parties. Like our purpose, and we're statutorily bound to make sure that the best interests of the children are represented. And that's what we do. And so it's interesting that parents can get very frustrated with, that. And then the next, week, they're like, oh, I appreciate you so much. But the third thing that, to summarize exactly why you would need a GAL, and I thought that this was really interesting and important, is if you have a high, need child. If you have somebody that is, we deal like autism and, there's just a lot of ADHD and ADD and things that are prevalent now in our society and our kids that is hard enough for two parents to take care of when they're like on the same page. But when they divorce, they're never on the same page. And so I think that that's really a great thought, is that bringing in a guardian ad litem to help with that, to help bring those decisions, because the parents aren't in a place right now where they can be mature to make those decisions. And that could really help. I think that that was a really great thought about that I didn't even think of.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the experience of taking both parents up to the hospital and meeting with their physician, all four of us together, to come up with a plan as to how to deal with, their child going forward, and then preparing that plan and submitting it to the court. And that can be super helpful going forward, because, these kids need special attention, even more so than most in a divorce situation. And having somebody that's trying to look out for it, without being emotionally involved in terms of the divorce and the breakup, can be valuable to the kids.
Right. And another benefit of a guardian ad litem is they can really help you create a logical and doable parenting plan. I think a lot of times when you have an attorney involved and you're thinking so much about yourself and what is going to benefit you, that you forget about the kids. And a lot of times you get a very stiff, rigid parenting plan that's not even workable. It's not even something that's manageable. I feel like I fix a lot of bad decrees with bad parenting plans because they weren't actually looking out for the best interest of the children. And, that's what a Garden of Litem is going to do, is that they're going to make sure that the kids are best interest, because they don't care. We don't necessarily care about what the parents need. And so helping you through the process. The other thing is, through a divorce, parents are already super emotional charged anyways. And a lot of times we're just trying to survive, and they're just trying to cope whatever way they can cope. And because of that, they make bad decisions for the kids, where a Garden of Litem could be like, hey, I'll help make good decisions for your kids, and you just take care of this emotional stuff. One of the things I always say is, you can be a really bad husband and a really bad wife, but you can be a good parent. You can be a good mom. You can be a good dad. And that's what the kids want. And that's what the kids deserve, is to have two parents that love them and that they get to equally love back. And so these are all reasons why a Garden of Litem could come in and really kind of help you get through that. It helps you so you don't have to make the decisions for your children based off of emotion. It allows somebody to actually help you do it by rational reason.
Right. And I think, as a parent going through a divorce, you have an attorney that's representing your needs. And so they will look at how this parenting plan or this decree looks at from your perspective.
Yeah.
And from my perspective as a guardian, I'll go in there and say, that doesn't make any sense for the kid. Right. Like you're going to have a problem down the road because this kid's going to grow up and go to soccer practice or want to go play with his friends. And if you have this rigid parenting plan, you're going to have an issue with dad in the future. So let's think about other options.
Right.
So it's absolutely spot on.
And the other thing is with parenting plans, a lot of times when attorneys that don't think necessarily like me and Sam, because we've done a lot of practice in developing to be different attorneys, but a lot of times they're thinking right now. So you have a child that's 5 years old and you're thinking, what does my child need right now? And you're not even thinking for the future. So again, you're hiring your attorney 2 years later, because when your child's 7, 8, 9, that parenting plan doesn't work. So these are all good reasons why a Garden of Litem coming in can help you really develop something that's going to benefit your kids long term and hopefully keep you out of court if necessary. So,
well, and the other thing for guardians is I get to talk to both parents, so I know what's going on in the other room, and I know what kind of a person they are. I know their personality, and I understand that while this maybe looks good on paper, it's probably not going to work out because so and so in the other room is going to pull some nonsense in 2 years anyway.
Right.
So.
And if they need a Garden of Litem, it's usually because, again, there's high conflict. There's problems there's distrust between the parties. And so, when you have somebody else kind of developing this plan on the best interest of your children, then it, again, also takes away the finger pointing of, well, you made that in the decree and now you're, violating it. Well, no, the Garden of Litem did it for your purposes of your kids, which is sometimes a little bit better. So I wanted to ask you, so you're a parent, you have the kids majority of the time, the court decides to appoint a gal, or you choose to appoint a gal. What can you do to help your children prepare and meet with a Garden of Litem?
That's a great question. It's one that gets asked a lot. What I usually tell parents is to tell their kids they're going to go meet with somebody that wants to talk to them about them, wants to get to know them, and wants to understand what's going on in their life from their perspective. And that if they don't want to talk about something, they don't have to talk about it with me on that first visit or the second one. Or my job as a guardian is to help make them feel comfortable enough that they're willing to talk to me about what's going on in their life. And I could do that a whole bunch of different ways, but as a parent preparing their kids, it's just like going to the doctor or the dentist or something like that. It's just, we're going to go in there, we're going to talk to them, be open, be honest. But that's really all that a parent should really say, because what we don't want to do is get an allegation that you're perhaps leading somebody, leading your kids or coaching them, telling them what to say. So I tend to tell people or parents to not, remind them that they should talk about what happened, a couple months ago,
Right.
or whatever. A good guardian knows what's going on in the case. Already know, I've read all the pleadings. I'm up to speed. I kind of know what's going on. I know what the allegations are. I'll ask questions that'll get me there, depending on what the child gives me in my interview. But if a parent is saying, well, don't forget to tell Sam about, what dad did 2 weeks ago, at this time, and the kid comes in and sits on my couch and says, hey, dad did this 2 weeks ago. Well, then mom's been talking to the kid, and then I need to make sure that that's not something that is an issue in the case. So, just reassure them that, I have their best interest at heart. I want to know what's going on in their life. I want to know what's going on and how this is affecting them, and that you guys can go out to get a treat after you're done talking with me or something like that. Something where it's
get them excited.
It's not as scary as it can be.
Right. I remember as a guardian ad litem, I'll have kids, come in and they'll sit down and I start just talking about school or, just wanting to get to know them. And then, like in the middle of our, like, hey, what's your favorite subject at school? Math. Yeah, but my dad yells at me when I, do math, and he, like all of a sudden it leads into this, like, my dad hit me or this. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. We weren't even talking about that. What, made you decide you wanted to talk about that? And they're like, well, my mom just made me, made sure that I remembered that I told you. And I'm like, oh, geez, so that's what, as guardian ad litems, we get to the point where we understand techniques and helping kids feel comfortable. But then when kids blurt things out, it's interesting because kids aren't naturally going to just remember a story, and they're not going to remember immediately what they need to say. And so if you're talking to them for 30 minutes and then they're supposed to go into this conversation of this, that's not natural for a kid. So they just want to get out what they want to say immediately. So it's fairly easy, I think, for us to find out if they've been a little bit manipulated and, coerced, influenced, I guess I should say, or persuaded into saying something to that. And obviously it doesn't look good to the parent that brought them, right?
Right. And that's what you want to avoid as a parent who is bringing a kid in, is you want to avoid that kind of a thing where I could bring a kid in and the first thing they say is, mom's boyfriend smacked me in the face. I'm like, well, I don't even know what your name is yet. You haven't even told me what your name is. Like, I might know that, but I haven't asked you the question. And I was going to talk to you about school or what you did today at recess or whatever. And so obviously, I'll continue down that path and ask some questions, but that raises red flags right off the bat about why would they just tell me that before? They don't even know who I am, but they're totally comfortable telling me that, boyfriend smacked him in the face.
Yeah.
So,
or when they can talk about something, they're very short on their answers, and they're not, as good at being having a conversation with you. What's your favorite color? Blue. Why? I don't know. Usually kids are, they're still not developed this ability like me and you having this conversation. And so, you get these short answers, and then all of a sudden, you kind of get into a little bit more of the serious topic or what you really want to know. Right. And all of a sudden they can just talk, and you're like, oh, that's so interesting. So it's a interview piece that I guess we've trained as guardian ad litems to really be able to kind of understand kids, and we also know from being a guardian ad litem that kids lie. Kids will lie to protect their parents, and it's sad because they do it in the I think more of a defense mechanism as like you said, they want to love both parents, and so they do it. Right. And but I kind of wanted to kind of get into this, and I know that you've seen this a lot with parental alienation. So we've talked a lot about this where, you have a gatekeeping parent. So this is the parent that discourages the parent time, that talks negatively about the other parent, who makes the child feel guilty for wanting to go to the other parent. These are just a few examples of what parental alienation is. And so they are called gatekeepers because they're basically, the keeper at the gate that is basically the one opening or shutting it for that kid to be able to have a relationship with the other parent. So I know you've seen it tons. Like, what, in your opinion, I mean, talk frank about this, but what do you feel like is some of the best tips for a parent out there to deal with this, and what you do as a guardian ad litem to really help with it as well?
So this is a hot topic that we have a lot of controversy surrounding, in the legal community in terms of parental alienation, what that means, what the appropriate terminology is, whether it's a syndrome or whether, it's diagnosable. I don't particularly like the terminology parental alienation because I think it's got sort of this polarization associated with it.
That and you're either a parental alienator or not. I get that because there is such a huge spectrum of it.
Right.
And I absolutely agree with you on that.
But it's easy, but it's in our context right now, that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
These alienation type behaviors. And I've had several parents say, well, I've read this book or I've seen this article and they, my ex, hits everything on the, all of these factors that they're doing right now, clearly say that it's parental alienation. And I've come back to them and said, I need you to kind of back off of that position because neither you nor I are qualified enough to say for certain whether or not a person is an alienator. Now, there may be behaviors that are being exhibited that are exacerbating issues. And we have a situation where a kid who once had a great bond with dad or mom now no longer wants to see them and just completely cuts off contact, doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Clearly, something's going on. And it's going to take a little while to figure out what's going on. So what I've seen is this scenario happens. The non-favored parent takes the issue back to court, and the court then appoints a guardian ad litem. And at the point that I get involved, the estrangement has already occurred, right? So Johnny's with dad, doesn't want to see mom at all, or vice versa, whatever. It's going to take me a little while to figure out what's really going on. So the first thing I would say is, to the extent possible, be a little bit patient with the professionals, because it's going to take a minute for me to understand what is the base, issue. Because when I first meet with this child, they're either going to be very talkative and talk completely negative about mom for whatever reason, or they're going to be kind of clammed up and they're not going to want to tell me very much. And it's going to take a little while for me to kind of get to know the kid a little bit, to the point so that I can get to the point where if there is a legitimate beef with the non-favored parent, we can then address that. And if we can address it and the kid feels like, okay, now we've addressed it, now we can move on, then we can move on a little bit quicker. But if it's this sort of, upper level, well, I just don't think that she appreciates me, or I don't know that she loves me, or something like that. It's going to take a little bit longer to address that particular issue. And it's going to involve some therapeutic professionals to try to do some family therapy or reunification, whatever you want to call it, whatever therapy you want to call it. Sometimes that doesn't work. And so then we have to go to a judicial option where we mandate certain parent time schedules, or some, phase in or completely swap custody for a short period of time so that we can reestablish this relationship with mom. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. As far as, if you're the favored parent, you got to get into therapy. If you're the parent that's there and this child does not want to go and see the other side and they're completely resisting, you need to get some training, you need to get some education as to how to deal with that kind of dynamic, because 9 times out of 10, there's something that you think that you're doing that you think is beneficial for the child, but is actually
harming,
contributing to that process. As a non-favored parent, you also need to get into therapy, and it's not just, maybe this is flippant, it's not just feel-good therapy, it's cognitive behavioral therapy, where it's going to address some of your behaviors, because there is probably something that you have done over time that has contributed to this estrangement. Now, the other side has an equal or perhaps greater responsibility in this, but you also have work to do. So anybody that's going through this process has to kind of take a step back and recognize, I am part of the problem, and it doesn't matter how much of a part I am, I'm a part of the problem, and I need to address something going forward. And so that's my tip, is be completely honest, be humble, come to the table saying, look, I'll do what I have to do and I'll make the changes. And don't look at the other side and say it's completely their fault, because it's not. There's fault on both sides.
And I'll go a step further, because a lot of times the alienating parent, so the parent that has taken the child, estranged the child from usually the custodial parent, that alienator, a lot of times they won't do the work, or they won't recognize they're the problem, because again, we talk about high conflict personalities, or they fit within the spectrum, they won't admit it. So we've talked about this time and time again, that it is your then responsibility to do the work, to know exactly what you can be doing so that you don't contribute to the issue. And I know Sam and I have seen this, that even if you have a parent that is refusing to do the work, if you do the work on your side, then the child will gravitate back to you, even if the other parent doesn't. And there's lots of books and lots of studies on this that, and a lot of times, you want to be like, why do I have to do the work? I'm not the one that's estranging the child, or I'm not the one that is, making the child feel this way. But at the end of the day, just like Sam said, like, you have to take some of that responsibility on. And by doing that, even if your ex-spouse does not do anything, you can benefit and you can improve the situation. The other thing I wanted to suggest is, like, this is becoming more of a trend. I don't know if it's a trend, but studies have shown that doing timeouts is what I've read they are called, where they do an absolute flip of custody, or they will give the estranged parent, 2 weeks, and the other parent doesn't get to contact the child as well. We have been seeing this as an improvement to help with this type of situation. And so if you're listening out there, whatever state you're in, I would encourage you to find an attorney that understands this and would be willing to fight for this in court. Because I think if we continue to make this the movement of moving this forward in lots of jurisdictions, then it will send a message to the alienating parent that the courts are, I guess, becoming wise to it, and that they're willing to do something drastic to try to stop it. So I always encourage people, find an attorney that understands this, that understands how to combat it, and then ask your judges to be bold and to do it. Because I think I've seen it, in particular in my cases, I have seen it work.
Yeah, and as a guardian, that's sort of my last resort piece, right? Like, we've tried a whole bunch of other stuff, and we're not having cooperation on the other side, or things aren't getting better, and it clearly needs some judicial intervention. And so we've done it. You've got to have a good team in place, a good therapeutic team, and maybe that's the subject of another podcast. To what needs to happen with that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of considerations to take into account before you do a flip. But I've seen it done. I've recommended it a couple times, and actually several times, and it's worked most of the time. So
Yeah, I know in
But
Utah.
it has to be a specific situation that it's going to work. Otherwise, it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen in Utah that it has become like that last resort, and it is being effective because if the more judges that do it, then the more time, then you can literally say you should not be doing this because, there's precedence to show that this could happen. And it kind of helps hopefully stop it before it starts because you're aware of the consequences that it can come after. And this is just recent. I mean, I never had seen this early in my career. This is just in the last few years that I've seen at least our commissioners in the state of Utah say this. I will do this if I feel like there's nothing else that you're doing or stepping up to do to fix this. Especially with the studies and everything that's going right now, where we know that continuing frequent contact with both parents is paramount to successful kids, to be successful in life and successful through the divorce. That is what there are obviously circumstances where joint custody, frequent continuous contact does not make sense. And we talk a lot about that, physical abuse,
Right.
There's lots of reasons why you could argue against that. But for most part, that is what the courts are trending to because that's what the studies are showing to have the best success for your kids through divorce. So when somebody's deciding, okay, this is my situation, I feel like a gal would be very good for my situation. What do you feel is like qualities that they should really be looking for in a guardian ad litem?
Oh, well, in short, just me, but I'm just kidding. That's,
I agree. Sam is very, very good at it. But I also want to point out Sam litigated as a litigious divorce attorney for the last 10 years. I mean, he has so much courtroom experience with high conflict divorce. I feel like that's lends you to really understand, first of all, case law, studies, appellate law regarding these issues. And then it's also, I guess you've worked with guardian ad litem, so you kind of got that experience as well.
right. So I was being silly earlier, which is probably a quality you want in a guardian ad litem, to be honest, because you want to be able to have somebody that can relate to kids.
True.
And I mean, my first and foremost job, as I look at it, is to try to help these kids feel comfortable, to help them feel like they have an advocate, that even though I might disagree with, I might recommend something contrary to what they have stated as their wish, they at least feel like they've been heard and that, I've been able to kind of explain to them what the process is a little bit. Somebody that you look for in a guardian ad litem, you want somebody that knows knows the courtroom, knows the current state of the law, and also has an understanding of the social research as it relates to kids and child psychology. Now, if you look at my resume or my bio, you're not going to see that I have a bachelor's in psychology or a master's in child psychology or anything like that. But I'm associated with the AFCC. I've done a bunch of research and reading of social studies, and I talk to therapists and psychologists every day and try to learn from them, what to look for in kids. And that, along with my experience, gives me the ability to kind of have a conversation with a child. And I'm going to get a whole lot of more information out of that than maybe somebody who hasn't done that. It's not done this for a long time, because I'm taking nonverbal cues. I'm understanding when they're saying stuff and how they're saying it. So it's hard to see that from a resume. But if you have a really good attorney that's well respected in the community, they're going to know the ones that the courts respect. And that's, I think, one of the best qualities that you can have in a guardian is somebody who the commissioners will respect their opinion, because that's how you're going to get some stuff done in court, is if the commissioners or the judges feel comfortable with what the guardian's recommending. And and again, I don't, Jill, I don't know how to quantify that and say this is how you look for a guardian in your particular area, other than to say that if you have a really good attorney who's respected in the community, they're going to know the guardians that are respected by the judiciary.
Right. And one of the things specifically is that with guardian license in Utah, we can say, if opposing counsel and I, being a representative on one side, if we can agree to a guardian ad litem, then that person will be appointed to our case. And so it makes it so that I, can work with the guardian ad litems that are respected with the court. In Utah, you don't actually have to practice family law to be a guardian ad litem. So if you go through the office where they appoint you a guardian ad litem, you take sometimes a chance of getting a guardian ad litem that does bankruptcy. And even though they still have to go through the same training as, Sam and I, they are, they just don't have the experience, the courtroom experience. They are not going in front of the commissioners and judges. And so you want to kind of look for that. And whatever the way that they appoint in your state, whether it's through an office or not, again, your attorney will be able to guide you to the best way of getting one that will represent you the best. And then kind of switching gears, so we talked about how to pick a guardian ad litem, but special master we've talked about is something that you would usually assign after the case, because they're kind of going to be your post-divorce, hey, I'm going to help you because you're still in high conflict, and I'm going to help navigate the actual divorce decree. That's a whole nother process of picking one as well. But I would suggest that it's a lot the same. Talk to your attorney. If your attorney is well respected in the community, they're going to know all the well respected special masters that can help you in your case as well. Did you have anything else to add to kind of that?
No, I think with the special masters, there's a little bit of an added. So I was a judge pro tem for justice courts for 4 years. And that kind of helped prepare me for doing special master work because, as a special master, you have to, take the information they're giving you and make a decision and feel comfortable with that decision. So you have to have somebody that understands the law, understands how the judiciary works a little bit so that they can make a decision that can be helpful and not just fodder for an objection that's going to cost you more money. So, but again, I think you're absolutely right. Your attorney is going to know, or at least have the ability to reach out to people who know who's doing special master work, and who's good. Yeah. Who's able to manage that. And sometimes somebody that they recommend may not be the right person for your case, and that's okay. I mean, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but you want somebody that's trying to do their best, and I try to do the best I can in each case, and sometimes I get it right. Sometimes, I miss something, but we're all human.
Right. And a lot of our cases are just super high conflict. So there's a lot of accusations going back and forth. And a lot of times we, the real important facts get lost in the weeds of the very non-important facts. And so when you're preparing to meet with the guardian ad litem, some advice that I would give you is do not come with 100 pages worth of stuff that you want me to read or you want me to know. I want you to sit down and write the top 10 bullet points, the most 10 important facts or things that have happened in this case that I have to know. And that's what I want you to sit down and talk to me about. And that's usually what I tell my parents to do, because if you give me so much information, it's just going to blow, I'm not going to be able to get all of the important facts that you need to. So you're going to sit down, you're going to summarize it into 10 points. And that's all I want. And it usually works because then at the end of the day, they're like, oh, yeah, well, you knew all the most important facts. The rest of it is just fluff. So one of the questions, Sam, that we get asked a lot, actually, with what we're doing is, when as a parent are you a mandatory reporter? We get that question sometimes for attorneys, but I kind of wanted to just discuss that question real fast with you, because if you're a parent that's listening and you're in a high conflict divorce, or you deal with a high conflict personality, like, you sometimes wonder, like, when should I report whatever, XYZ? So right. I wanted you to see, let's talk a little bit about that and answer that question that gets asked a lot.
So and maybe it's just terminology. When I hear mandatory reporter, I think I have a statutory obligation to report child abuse. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about.
That's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I guess as a guardian ad litem, we have mandatory reporting. Like, there's three things that we have to report no matter what. Can you rattle them off? Child porn.
Unreported instances of child abuse. Is that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Computer crimes.
I'm drawing a blank.
And, and then we're a mandatory reporter of elderly abuse.
Correct.
So as a guardian ad litem, we have to report those no matter what. Can't get around that. So if we find child pornography, I'm going to report it. Doesn't matter.
Right.
So as a parent, are you a mandatory reporter? That's a good question.
No.
You are not a mandatory reporter.
You're not under a statutory obligation to report.
Right.
But because I'm a professional and in a fiduciary responsibility, that I am.
Right. So as a parent, because we get those parents that call DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, or in your state it might be called Child Protective Service, CPS. We get those parents that call them all the time.
Right.
So I guess the answer to the question is, you're not a mandatory reporter, but as Sam Sorensen, when
right.
would you recommend that somebody reports abuse?
Well, I mean, any instance of child abuse needs to be taken seriously. And so I want to make sure that's clear. In a divorce situation, if you have a high conflict divorce that you unfortunately are in, and you have a guardian or you have a special master, my suggestion is to report that to them first.
Yes.
And have them look at it. Now, if we're talking about serious physical harm that's been done, broken arms, something that has to go to the hospital most likely will be reporting that.
Yeah. Teachers are mandatory reporters too.
Teachers, therapists. Mm-hmm. If I'm involved, I typically like the child to meet with the therapist and have the therapist make that report. And so if you are in a situation in a high conflict divorce and you have multiple reports of child abuse, my recommendation is take them to their therapist, have the child talk to the therapist about what occurred. And the therapist can then determine whether or not it needs to be reported. A report from a therapist or a guardian ad litem or a professional is going to have a different effect than if a parent calls it in anyway. But again, I mean, we're talking about kids that are being abused, and that's it's super concerning. But as you and I have both seen cases, we have situations where every time they come back from dad's house, there is a report that dad did something, and it's been unsubstantiated, the last 7 times. At some point we have child abuse going back the other way by this,
the reported parent
report, this continued reporting. So, first time, go ahead and report it. Subsequent times, I'd involve a therapist is probably what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be right. That may be something that people dispute me on, but that's what I that's what I'd recommend.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what we also like. A lot of times we get, oh, there's another bruise on my kid's butt and it has to be this. And we're like, okay, it could be this, but it could not be this. So we have to do more of a thorough job of stating it. If you yell too loud the same thing over and over again, nobody's going to eventually hear you. And that's not protecting your child. So you need to make sure that if this is happening and you're concerned about it, that you get your child into therapy. You get a guardian at Litem who is then being able to do the investigative reporting, and they are mandatory reporters. They will report it if after they interview and they do their investigation, they find it's necessary. And that's really important because that's the best way you can get your kids protected. And that's the best way that you can ensure that it doesn't happen again. So, I would love just to hear a little bit of last advice on how you believe somebody can utilize a GAL to really ensure that they can help your kids, their kids.
Well, one of the things that I've found doing this for the last, I don't even know how many years now, is that kids really want to be able to love both their parents, and so. And the kids pick up on more than you think they pick up on. Mm-hmm. And anybody that's a parent, just even in a non-divorce situation, will know that kids pick up on stuff that you don't necessarily say, or that you're talking to your girlfriend or your boyfriend about, or another family member. Just know, and I tell almost every single family that I'm involved with is that your kids want to love both of you, and you need to recognize that your kid, they understand that you dislike or you are frustrated with the other parent. And that makes them sad because not only have they, they're in a split household now, but they know that mom and dad don't like each other. Mm-hmm. And whether or not if you say, "Oh, I love your mom," even though we're not together, but then turn around and you act differently, they remember the action more than the words. So just understand that your communication with your ex is important. Read books, do what you can to improve your co-parenting relationship, and that will help your kids more than you know down the road as you go through these situations. And it's extremely difficult if you have an ex that is completely not interested in that. And I get that. But you can do your part to try to help with that.
Absolutely. In my book, No One Dies from Divorce, in chapter 8, Your Kids Will Be Okay, I specifically talk about that there was a study done by the University of Missouri, and it specifically studied what children need from parents during a divorce. And they phrase the results as if the child is telling you what they need. So think of your children. And this is what they said. I'm going to read them because I think that this goes along perfectly with what we're saying. I need both of you to stay involved in my life. Please call me, email, text, and ask me lots of questions. When you don't stay involved, I feel like I'm not important and that you don't really love me. Please stop fighting and work hard to get along with each other. Try to agree on matters related to me. When you fight about me, I think I did something wrong and I feel guilty. I want to love both of you and enjoy the time that I spend with each of you. Please support me in the time that I spend with each of you. If you act jealous or upset, I feel like I need to take sides and love one parent more than the other. Please communicate directly with each other so that I don't have to send messages back and forth between you. When talking about my other parent, please say only kind things or don't say anything at all. When you say mean, unkind things about my other parent, I feel like you're expecting me to take your side. And then 6, please remember that I want both of you in my life. I count on my mom and dad to raise me, to teach me what is important, and to help me when I have problems. So right along, just remember, guys, like your children are the most important thing out of this. And, when you chose to, You can choose to divorce your spouse, but you can't choose to divorce your kids. They deserve to love both of you. And we know here at No One Dies from Divorce, I'm bringing on experts just like Sam to help you recognize that this isn't the end. Divorce isn't going to destroy your kids. If we can, get to a place where you both can do exactly what your children need and let them be kids, let them love you, let them love the other person as well. So, Sam, you have just been a joy. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast. I want people to know where they can find you and get more information about what you do and the things that you offer. So tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on the web, www.seblegal.com. And that's really where I'm at.
Yeah.
I'm on social media, but I don't really update that very often. So you can try to find me. If you find me, then maybe I'll respond. See.
Sam is, like I said, one of the most respected garden at Litems special masters in the state. The commissioners appoint him to cases without even asking because they know he takes on the hard cases and he does such a good job. So, Sam, thanks for sharing some of your wisdom today and giving some information to our listeners that I know could help so many. So thank you so much.
But thanks, Jill. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Remember, No One Dies from Divorce, the book. It's sold everywhere local here in Utah. It's also all online, Barnes & Noble, Target.com, and Amazon. You can get it Prime in a day. So go ahead and check it out. Until next time, thanks so much, Sam.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed, please subscribe, follow, and share. I'd love to hear your questions and feedback. You can contact me at community@jillcoyle.com. See you next time. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. Any advice given on the podcast is general and shall not be construed as legal advice.